You are listening to KFUG LP Crescent City 101.1 FM. I'm Amanda Doctor, and hopefully I am joined on the other end by one Paul Kritz, station manager, and we're hoping to broadcast. Paul, are you with me?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let me turn you up a little more. Reporting live from the United Methodist Church in Smith River, specifically. There is a public meeting going down.
There is indeed this public meeting happening in the, they were set up for like overflow and everything. I don't think they'll have that, but the group that is assembled here in the United Methodist Church, they look like, there are a lot of familiar faces, a lot of Delmart faces here. These are the folks with the most skin in the game, I do believe. This meeting being staged by True North Organizing Network here is for the, to discuss the upcoming decisions being made by the California Water Board about regulating what gets into the estuary of the Smith River. And this is Reverend Dana Gill. We're getting going.
Methodist Church. I'm Reverend Dana Gill. It is wonderful to be hosting you all tonight for the Northern California.
I apologize for the distortion. That may just be how it goes.
Meeting so that we can hear people's voices and opinions and stories. I just wanted to do a few housekeeping things. If you need to use the restroom, we are all adults. Feel free to get up whenever you need to. Restrooms are all the way down the hallway. On the right-hand side, men's is just before the water fountain. The women's is just after the water fountain. Please feel free to get up and use it. There's also water in the kitchen should you need it. Ask me any questions if you have them about the facilities. And tonight's order of operations, you'll hear the presentation from the Water Board. There will be some time for question and answer, and then a time for public comment. Please remember, I know that this can be a very emotional time for some people on both sides of the spectrum. Please remember to stay civil and kind to one another. We're not here to take away anyone's livelihood or point fingers, but we do want to hear stories and what everyone has to say. I will hand it over to the Water Board now.
Check, check. Now you guys can hear me. Okay, great. Thank you. So again, thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. Welcome. We are with the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. And right now we are at the beginning process of developing water quality regulations for lily bulb farming in the Smith River Plain. And what we wanted to do tonight is to give you some information about what we do, who we are, how we do it, and what those water quality regulations are expected to be, the scope of what they will cover, and the schedule of when we are hoping to develop them, release them to the public for your comment, and then bring them back to our board for adoption. So, as Dana said, we want to give you some information on that, and then we want to hear from the community, your thoughts, your input on it, and we also plan to talk a little bit about 2 additional meetings we have while we're up here. We're going to be at the Board of Supervisors tomorrow morning to provide a similar update to them as what we're going to give to you tonight. And then we're also doing a CEQA scoping meeting tomorrow night, and later on in the presentation we'll explain a little bit about what that is and how you can participate in that. So the presentation is about 20 minutes, so bear with us while we get through it and just provide you some background. And then, as Dana indicated, we're going to do some question and answer at the end to allow you to have some dialogue with us for things in the presentation that you want some clarification on. And following that, we will, folks can come up and give some input. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to introduce ourselves in a minute. I just wanted to give a little background about what the meeting's going to look like for folks. Okay. So we're going to ask that you just please hold questions until the end, until we get to our Q&A. Let us run through the presentation because we might cover some things that you have a question about, and then we'll have plenty of time for you to come up and ask questions. So my name is Brenna Sullivan. I'm an engineering geologist here with the Water Board, and I'll pass it on to the other folks in the team here.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Kuzmar. I'm a senior engineer for the Regional Water Board. Good evening, Chris Watt. I'm the groundwater specialist at the Regional Water Board.
And I just wanted to say we have some flyers that we printed out that are back at the sign-in table, and they have my contact information. There's a QR code on there that you can scan for our website. If you want any information or material, we can direct you to our website. Please feel free to email me or call me at that number up there or on the sheet back there. Okay, so the things that we'll cover in the presentation over the next 20 minutes, we want to give you an overview about the water quality regulations that we are starting to write right now, the purpose of those, the scope of those, and the schedule by which you can expect that those will be released to the public for review. We also want to discuss with you ways that you can be involved in the process. You know, the process for us in developing water quality regulations has statutory requirements that allow the public to be involved at various checkpoints along the way. So we wanted to outline those for you and let you know the schedule of when you can anticipate that. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the meeting tomorrow night and kind of frame it, because environmental quality law can be a little confusing at times. So we just wanted to prep you if you're interested in attending that meeting and give you a little more information as to what that's going to be about. So we just wanted to start with who we are. We are part of the California Water Boards, and that is the state agency that's charged with protecting water quality. And what we do as an agency is we designate beneficial uses of water. So that is, for example, drinking water, or when you recreate in surface water, in creeks and streams. We protect the quality of water necessary for those types of beneficial uses. There are a whole list, and if you're interested, we can send you some if you email me. But here's our mission. We want to preserve, enhance, and restore the quality of California's water resources and drinking water for the protection of the environment, public health, and all beneficial uses for the benefit of present and future generations. And specifically, this is us, the North Coast Regional Water Board. You can see we are outlined in blue. We cover a really large area. The water boards are they're 9 in the state, and we are basically from the coast up to the coastal range and those drainages. So we protect water quality for all of the water bodies within that region outlined in blue. We implement plans and policies like these water quality regulations to address problems with water quality. And this third one, we issue regulatory actions to enforce water quality laws and regulations. We also have funding available to attain the goals of our agency. So let's talk about the water quality regulations that we are developing up here in the Smith River Plain. So it's kind of hard to see on this map. Here's Crescent City. We're mostly talking about this area here, and as you're all familiar with this area, most of the lily bulb cultivation area, although there is some up here. And so the project area is really the Smith River Plain hydrologic sub-area, all this area outlined in blue, but it will affect this area up here in the Smith River Plain. So in the Smith River Plain, there are impaired tributaries for copper and diuron, and what that means is that there have been tributaries in which we have detected exceedances of aquatic life benchmarks for copper and diuron, which are 2 pesticides that are applied on lily bulb fields. I want to make a point that those are aquatic life benchmark exceedances, so they're not necessarily tied to human health risk levels. They're risk levels for aquatic life. We have a water quality monitoring program that has shown that there's copper toxicity exceedances downstream of lily bulb operations. And then in general, the groundwater quality for use should be protected in this area. So those are the kind of top 3 priority concerns that our water quality regulations called the lily bulb order will look at addressing. So the next two slides are going to be a little busy, but we wanted to provide you some background as to how we got here. I know that this is, for some, have been involved in this process a long time, and so we kind of wanted to walk through what our agency has done through the years up in this area. So in the early 2000s, we began an ambient monitoring program around our entire North Coast region, and that included sampling a couple of creeks up in the Smith River Plain. Our agency initiated an ag program in the mid-2010s, formed a stakeholder group, and decided how we're going to, how our agency was going to adopt water quality regulation for agriculture in our region. And ultimately, we decided to do it by commodity and geography, instead of like one big permit that covers all of agriculture in our region. So part of that was trying to decide which areas and which agriculture in our region we were going to prioritize. So around that time, our board determined that a monitoring program or a monitoring study up here should determine the next steps on how we prioritize the development of water quality regulations up here. So there was a study conducted between 2014 and 2017, and those results were released in 2018 and found that pollutants were being delivered to downstream locations from lily bulb operations. So our board directed staff to form a watershed stewardship team, to develop a water quality management plan through partners, which became the watershed stewardship team. And the members on that stewardship team were the lily bulb growers, the tribe, there was the Smith River Alliance, there were some state agencies. I'm trying to think, I don't want to miss anyone, but there are some federal agencies as well. So all of those entities worked as partners in developing that water quality management plan. It was a voluntary program that the growers agreed to participate in. It included water quality monitoring, and there was supposed to be an element of adaptive management to inform the development of the water quality regulations. So the water quality management plan was approved by our board in 2021. It's been implemented for a couple of years, and now we are in this phase where we're starting to develop our water quality regulations, the order, using information that we have learned from our water quality monitoring and the water quality management plan. So in early 2024, we started contacting folks who may be interested in joining a technical advisory group for the order, and we've just started. We convened that group in August, and we decided to also have this community meeting up here early on in the process to inform you all of what our plan was and what we were looking at. And it's going to be we're going to have a schedule slide coming up so you can see what we're thinking, but it's going to be another couple years before we have a draft for you to review. So this is kind of a conceptual overview of what those water quality regulations will look like. We have a findings section under which we provide the rationale for why we have the requirements and monitoring that we do in the regulations. So it's basically a rationale for the types of things that the order will require. There will be requirements and prohibitions. So, for example, requirements to implement management practices on the farm to prevent the discharge of pollutants. There will be a monitoring and reporting program. So there will be water quality monitoring and then reporting of that monitoring, which will then drive adaptive management. Let me bring up a slide here to describe what adaptive management is. We'll go back to the other two. But essentially, this is a really important part of the order. The growers will be required to implement farm practices to control, minimize, or eliminate the discharge of pollutants. So they'll implement those practices on their farm, then they will monitor the water quality, and there will be thresholds that if they're exceeded, they'll have to go back and improve their practices. So it's kind of a feedback loop that is driven by water quality monitoring results. Okay? And then the final element is for ease of getting together and having a group monitoring program, the growers will be allowed to form a coalition together to, work together to monitor this water quality. So this slide is a little bit of, it's wordy and it's legalese, but the really important things that we wanted to communicate is this is our driving policy for the things that our water quality regulations have to include. So they have to have clearly stated goals. We have to say what our goals are and relate them to the water quality issues that we're trying to improve. Okay, there has to be a description of the management practices that we think will meet those stated goals. There has to be a time schedule with quantifiable milestones to meet the goals of the order. There has to be sufficient feedback mechanisms so the enrollees in the order, the water board, and the public know that those goals are being met. And finally, there needs to be clear consequences if those goals are not met. So these are all the things that we have to incorporate into all of our regulatory actions for non-point source. And we'll talk about what non-point source is in the next slide. So this is a really simple schematic, but non-point source pollution is really different than like effluent or water going through a pipe and running into a stream. That's a point source. That's one stream of water flowing into a creek, and you can measure what's in that, and you can know, quantifiable what is going into the creek from that pipe. In non-point source pollution, which includes agricultural lands, timberlands, other disparate land uses, there are many different ways in which pollutants can enter receiving waters, which is either creeks or groundwater. So you can get stormwater running off fields and carrying sediment or other pollutants. You can get leaching into groundwater. You can get groundwater leaching back into surface water. So it's a really complex dynamic system, and so that's what it's a complex system, and it requires complex solutions. And so our non-point source policy directs us in writing these complex regulations that they have to meet those stated goals that we talked about. Okay, a couple just quick elements to walk you through what we'll expect this order to have. One of the elements we expect is setbacks from streams. And so here is an example of what that may look like. So you'll have, the farm area with a vegetated buffer, riparian vegetation area, and the purpose of those stream setbacks is just to provide sediment filtering, kind of have a buffer between the farming field and the water body. And these types of buffers already exist on many of the farms around here. So what the order will look at, for example, the water quality regulations are, are those setbacks currently adequate? Do they need to be bigger? Those are the types of things that we want to scope with the community and with a technical advisory group. Here's another example of what that looks like in real life. Okay, so you can see we already have a setback to a stream here, and so over the next year while we're developing these water quality regulations, part of what we're looking at is what's already existing, is that adequate, or should the order go further? The order will include water quality monitoring. So we'll have monitoring. We'll require monitoring in the tributaries of the Smith River for copper and other pesticides. We'll require monitoring of groundwater for nitrates. And then the order will include a drinking water supply well monitoring program that looks at nitrate and pesticides. Okay, so here is our schedule to projected adoption of the order. So we're past August 2024, we're right in here somewhere. So we began our technical advisory group meeting in August. And over the next year, we're going to be working with that group to answer some of the questions that I just talked about. We will complete a draft order in a draft EIR, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and release it to the public in early 2026. And that gives us enough time to respond to comments, make revisions, and bring it back to our board for adoption in fall of 2026. So with that, we wanted to talk about different ways in which the public can be involved in that process. So the first one is tomorrow night we have a CEQA scoping meeting. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. Bear with us, we'll explain what all that is. And that's tomorrow night in Crescent City. The next big milestone for the development of the water quality regulations is the public comment period after we release our draft. So after we work with our technical advisory group, we draft an order, we release it to the public, and we get comments back on it. And then we review those comments and come up with revisions. And part of that is we have a public workshop with our board. So you'll be able to read the regulations and either submit written comments or come in person to our workshop, which will likely be held up here in Del Norte County. And then finally, there's an adoption hearing that you can attend in the fall of 2026 is what we're projecting, where our board considers adoption of the order and certification of our environmental impact report. And so a quick note on that, because I didn't cover it before, we are technical staff. So we work with the various interested persons and look at the technical information and propose regulations to our board. Our board it's an appointed body, and so they're the ones that ultimately make the decision, yay or nay, on it, or they tell us to go back and change certain aspects of it. So, we kind of propose things and they review it, listen to public input, and either approve it or tell us to go back and do more work on it. Okay, couple last slides to talk about our environmental impact report work. So tomorrow, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the United Methodist Church in Crescent City, we also have a Zoom option. We're going to be doing a CEQA scoping meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is to scope the environmental impact that the water quality regulations will have. It's kind of a confusing concept. We'll run through it in the next couple of slides, but it's separate from the order, but it's an environmental impact on the impact of the order itself. And part of that is we scope kind of the range of environmental analysis that we need to do, and we receive oral comments and written comments. And so there'll be an opportunity for both tomorrow, and we can give you some more information on it. So I'll kind of go through this slide really quickly, but California has an Environmental Quality Act called CEQA, and as public agencies, when we develop regulations, we need to analyze the environmental impact of those regulations. So it's not the environmental impact of the order or of lily bulb farming itself, it's environmental impact of what we're going to require in our order. So, for example, let's say someone wants to comply with the order's requirement to not have runoff. So they decide to build a sediment catchment basin. So there might be environmental impacts from the construction of this catchment basin. So part of our CEQA scoping is to hear from the public, do you foresee any environmental impacts from that? Even if over the long run it's a net benefit to water quality, there might be impacts that we need to analyze as part of this project. So I don't want to get too far more into it, but I know that the CEQA scoping meeting has been part of the slate of meetings that have been advertised, and so we wanted to give you a little information about what to expect tomorrow if you're interested in going. So with that, I'm going to leave our contact information slide up and invite you all to come up and ask us some questions. Okay, so I think the way we're going to do it is we're going to have the mic up here. And we encourage you, if you have a question, to come up to the mic so everyone can hear, and feel free to ask us your question, and we will answer to the best of our ability, and then after Q&A is over, we'll get some public input.
Hi, I'm Alicia Williams. So I kind of asked it came in. Are we going to be proposing any alternatives? I don't. So I kind of asked this when I came in. I was trying to find out. Hello? I was trying to find. You got to talk right into it. If you were going to discuss any solutions for alternate uses. I mean, obviously they're dumping chemicals for reasons. So are we talking about solutions for them that they can easily switch to at this point, or this is going to take years till we get to that point? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So you're right. These types of regulatory actions by our agency take years to develop. There's statutory requirements that we have to follow. I think it's really important for us to note that our agency is charged with protecting water quality, and so there's a limited scope in which we are here to talk about, lily bulb activities and how they impact water quality. However, if you have other questions, related to things that are outside that scope, we're happy to try to direct you to the, appropriate places. But this meeting is to talk about water quality regulations.
So, you're the water quality, but what about air quality? I'm north of the lily fields, and when we get that southern breeze coming up, I don't know, I kind of feel like I don't feel very well when the January and February when I notice that they're pumping the pesticides into the ground. And last year we took on a couple that from the fires up in Gasky, and they brought their beehives. They're all happy, summer and the harvest time and all that. But come January and February, they were just spread out all over the ground with their tongues hanging out. And that must come from the breeze or from somewhere. So this is the water quality, but what about air quality and our health from the air impact? That's what I got to say. And okay, so the lily farmers have been here a long time, but where's the threshold to say, hey, how about the disclosures about, I don't remember my realtor telling us about any disclosures about poison coming up through the air. And at what time do they say, okay, you're building a community here, you're giving out permits from the county to build, so when do they tell us what's going on in the air so we can decide whether we want to live here or not?
So something that a lot of folks might not know, I don't know how well published it is up here, but the county ag department is the entity that you report pesticide complaints to. So if you're worried about, for example, air quality due to pesticide application, that would be the local entity that takes those reports and then follows up with them. Eventually the California Department of Pesticide Regulation is the state agency that regulates pesticides, but there is a local arm that you can call and report, I think I saw this, or I'm experiencing this, and they follow up and they work with the County Department of Public Health as well. Not that it's not our concern, but as the water quality agency, it's outside of our scope.
Yeah, I'm just looking to start with procedural clarification. I just read an email last week from you, Brianna, clarifying that there were 3 meetings.
Yes. 1
tonight and 2 tomorrow.
Yes.
But I didn't hear any mention of 2 tomorrow. We're only talking about 1 tomorrow, or
no,
after the 10 a.m.?
2 tomorrow. So one is at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and it's going to be very similar kind of content to what we presented to you tonight. And then the CEQA scoping meeting will be tomorrow night. And so you're all encouraged to attend both meetings, but one will be, similar. We're going to talk about the order, talk about the schedule. The supervisors are going to ask us questions, and then there'll be a period of public comment.
Did I miss something? Did you mention that when you started out your presentation?
I think so, but
okay.
Yes,
all right, maybe
just briefly. I didn't have a slide on it, but yeah.
Right. And then just a general question. I know for a fact that in the late 70s, early 80s, I'm not sure the exact year, Autocarp and Temec were found in local wells. And one of the wells belonging to a family of lilybulb growers, and that they were very concerned about. But it wasn't until the year 2000 that the Water Board shows any involvement up here at all with lilybulbs. Why such a delay when Autocarp and Temec, which aren't used anymore, I don't believe, but they were in people's wells, and yet what I thought the Water Board was a group with some teeth, and yet how come that long delay to 2000 that you're even talking about being here?
Testing. All right, there we go. So, Don, I think you're talking about back in the 80s, there were some detections of pesticides in some of in some domestic wells. And our agency was involved in that and doing a very detailed well sampling and scientific analysis to look at whether that pesticide posed a threat to drinking water. And as a result of that study, that pesticide was no longer allowed to be used up here. So there was a lot of work done during that period of time related to those groundwater effects. And what we're dealing with here today was driven by monitoring that we did in the early 2000s that revealed that there were copper and synthetic pesticides. So two slightly different issues, but we were involved back in the 80s.
What I wanted to ask kind of similarly goes with that. My name is Candace Vargas, and I live up on Ocean View Drive. A new resident as of the last 3 years of Smith River, but since then, I've had a lot of skin conditions that I didn't have before. And then when I go to the doctor says, well, it has to do with the water that you're using. I wish someone would have told me that before I moved here. And then it makes me wonder, what about the kids that grew up here and they're drinking this water? I heard you say something that it has something to do with agriculture. What about the people? It's fine and dandy that we're going to grow things here, which I can't even grow a garden, which I've been an avid gardener since 2016. Nothing grows here. It doesn't grow like it used to. I came from LA via the Bay Area via up here, and nothing grows like it used to. It's really sad. We invested a lot of time and money and energy to move up here because we wanted a better life, and it just feels like we're not getting that. So my question is, what brought y'all here, and what caused your initial investigation to figure out what was going on? Was it the people complaining? Was it the gardeners complaining? Or was it just somebody's just harebrained idea that, hey, let's check the water in Del Norte County? I mean, what brought you guys here, and what will be the result? Will we be getting better quality? If I were to drill a hole and dig a well in my property, could I use it? Could I use that water? After everything that's gone in the past, I mean, how long does it take for it to filter through that where it becomes something that's safe for us to use?
Okay, so I can answer the question about what brought us here. Back in 2002, I believe, or 2003, our region has what's called a surface water ambient monitoring program. And what ambient means is we go out and we test the water quality in our different creeks and rivers around the North Coast randomly. And it's used as kind of a screening tool for identifying maybe new impacts that we're not aware of. And so back in 2003, monitoring began up here, and I'm trying to remember when that hit. What year was that? Do we remember?
2010.
It was 2010 when there were some pesticides found in tributaries downstream of lilybulb fields. And so that kind of launched the inquiry. We had in between 2014 and 2017, our board had directed us to do a monitoring study up here and look at a suite of parameters. There was a groundwater study that was also done. And then as a result of that, which found that there were synthetic pesticides and copper toxicity downstream of lilybulb farms. That's when the board directed its staff to develop a water quality management plan with those partners that I mentioned earlier. So it's really been a long process since those detections in 2010 to try to get more information through monitoring, work collaboratively with folks up here through the different partners, and kind of build the baseline for what is eventually now coming down the line as the water quality regulations.
And I think you also had a question about the water you're using. Are you connected to a public utility? Do you get? Okay, yeah, then I would consult with your water provider and ask them for their consumer report, and they should provide that to you.
Okay. Method and frequency for testing groundwater, and then, you talked about the buffers for runoff. What is like a best management practice for groundwater? Like what would be something that the order would put in place for that?
And let me just confirm, you're asking about groundwater monitoring that would likely be in the order, or groundwater monitoring that we've conducted? Both. So I can I'll speak briefly about what we're thinking about in the order. Nothing is, finalized yet, but these are some early ideas. So one of the primary concerns around agriculture and groundwater is nitrate leaching. Nitrate is part of fertilizer that gets applied, and if it's over-applied, it can leach down into groundwater. So the order will require fertilizer management. It will require that folks have a budget, a nitrogen budget of what gets applied and what gets removed through the crop material, because nitrogen gets removed when you harvest it. And so there's a way of managing your farm such that nitrate doesn't leach down. The order would require groundwater monitoring, both drinking water well testing. So if there's a drinking water well on a parcel that's in the order, that well would have to be tested, and that would be an annual test looking at nitrate, some water quality parameters, and a list of pesticides if those pesticides have been applied. Then there's also groundwater trend monitoring, and that looks at the impacts of groundwater over the entire region. That's kind of a monitoring network, and that would also look at nitrate and might be pesticides. We're still looking at the data that we have and deciding what parameters would likely go into that monitoring program. But that's kind of a simple rubric. And I don't know, do we have information on the monitoring study that we did, kind of what we looked at?
Yeah, there was a monitoring study that was done through a volunteer effort where landowners agreed to have their wells tested. That was published. It's on our website, and it looked at nitrogen and synthetic pesticides and found that in some areas there's elevated nitrogen and low levels of some of the synthetic pesticides that were discontinued in use some decades ago. And I think you also had a question about what are the management practices so as Brenna mentioned, for fertilizer, it's a budget. For the synthetic pesticides, it's an iterative approach. So if they're found, then why are we finding them? Are they being over-applied? So it's digging into the application. The registration and use of those pesticides is a state agency called Department of Pesticide Regulation, and so they are participating in our advisory group, technical advisory group. So we hope to get some help from them in looking at the management practices.
And just to clarify, all of that is self-testing, right? It's not, there's no third party that does that.
Yeah, all of the monitoring in our regulations is self-monitoring.
As a fisheries biologist, I've worked for decades in Southern California on many projects like this where water quality was an issue. And I have just seen on many occasions the lethal effects of first flush. If I had a research study here, I would have been out there at midnight last night on all these tributaries sampling every hour, because first flush is lethal. And I've seen you done in the past water quality testing after 5-inch rain events. Why? Can you restate your question? Why do you not test first flushes? First flushes are lethal. First flushes are where low volumes of water, high concentrations of pesticide first hit the creek in the fall, like last night. A good study would have been out there at midnight sampling those creeks for first flush, not later on in the winter. First flush.
So I can't speak to our current monitoring effort. I'm not the person in charge of our swamp monitoring. What I can say, and maybe we can elaborate on that in a minute, but what I can say is for the monitoring that's going to be in the order, which is what we're scoping moving forward with the technical advisory group, that's one of the questions that we have is what's the frequency of monitoring? When should it occur? What should kind of the various guidelines be in that monitoring effort? And I think it's really important actually to talk a bit about like when the draft order comes out for public review, what are the types of things that our board will want to hear from the community on? What are the types of things that can be improved in the order, for example, for tighter schedules of implementation, for better monitoring design, for more accurate adaptive management related to that monitoring. And so, I think I just want to set expectations for the types of things that, as a community member, you can affect in the draft order that will make it a better, more responsive regulatory document. And that's one of them. We're currently scoping what our monitoring program will look like. We have, a lot of questions that we haven't answered. And so I would encourage you, to be involved in that process and provide us with that information, the rationale, and, the perspective on it.
Like it's not affecting us. We're not killing our river. 28 times the legal limit of copper, and you guys are even following your own rules, your own mission statement. Why are you guys ignoring it? Why are you ignoring it? You're poisoning our river, our food, everything. How is this being ignored? Like it's not real. When we know it's real. How is this because of corporate America because we're getting paid off behind in the back parking lot somewhere? I mean, seriously. It's a hazard to all of us. And we're still allowing this like it's nothing. Its life depends on it. The river life, human life, air life, all of us. All for money? It's all about greed? Someone getting paid off somewhere? I mean, how are you guys protecting the farmer? How?
For 70 years.
70 years of this shit?
70 years.
70 years of being toxic poison?
Still going on today.
At the cleanest river in the United States, one of the cleanest rivers, and we're ruining it with it's all been tested. We all know this since 2010. I don't know. I think this is why we're here, and I know this is going to be a really unsatisfactory answer, and I apologize ahead of time. We have, as staff for the water board, we have this statutory path laid out in front of us. And there are other pathways to affect change. There's the political pathway. They're, putting pressure on local leaders, elected leaders. So it's not going to be a satisfactory answer. We have a path that we're on that we have to follow that, is. We know it's all in there. We know that we're still just we've ignored this long enough. We've been ignoring it. They're not really doing their job. The water board is not doing their job. I encourage you to come to our board meeting and say all those things that you said and let our board hear that, because they're the ones that ultimately make the decisions on, how far the order should go, when it should be adopted, the schedule of,
implementation within the order, and what the feedback mechanisms are.
So I kind of wanted to elaborate. I was pretty much, it's the same type of comment, but a little bit more pointed in the questioning. So water and humans, we drink water, right? Okay. So you guys are basically reinventing the wheel, like as if you don't know what harmful levels are, and you've done studies now since 2010. That's 14 years. Why are you acting like you have to reinvent the wheel here? There's other water boards in this state, in this country, in this planet that have figured all this out. Why aren't you using proven effective models for healthy water for communities?
So, I mean, I can attempt to answer that a little bit. And again, it's not going to be a satisfactory answer. It's easy to say that it's simple, but it's a really complex system. We know what we found monitoring-wise. We don't know, for example, how the pollutants reach the various groundwater, surface water. You know, what is the nexus between what's applied and what ends up in the waterways? Those are complex problems that, from a technical perspective, take a while to figure out. It might be unsatisfactory to the public that wants more instantaneous action.
It's not about instantaneous. Like, it's already been at least 14 years that you guys had plenty of data. What I don't understand is you have a technical advisory board that has been voluntary participation of farmers, of all these different levels of government, including your agency. And during that entire time, you're telling us you never discussed alternatives to these chemicals?
Yeah, as Brenda said, our authority is very limited. We cannot go and tell a farmer, you cannot apply a pesticide. We do not have the power to do that.
What's your power?
That's a great question.
What's your power?
Our power is limited to adopting requirements that people must follow to control the pollution from leaving their property. And that is a public process that goes through a lot of scrutiny, has to be defensible, can be subject to challenges, and our board must prioritize our work to do that. We have 20,000 square miles in our region. We have thousands of miles of impaired waters, and there's less than 100 of us working on it, covering everything from industry, like rock quarries that dump pollution into salmon streams, to timber operations that cause landslides and plug up streams, to cities that have runoff from their urban landscapes, from dairy operations. So we have a very broad area that we cover, and our board has to prioritize based on all those impairments where to put their resources. This order here was raised to a priority level recently when the information from the 2014 to 17 study came out. Our board said, get started on this, start it in a voluntary way. And we worked with the growers to figure out how can we solve this problem. And they started to make changes on their own. Now we're in a regulatory phase where we say you need to do these things. But it is a long process to develop regulations. It's not a short thing. We can't just go out and tell people to stop. We do not have that power.
So the extinction of cocoa is going to be resolved then?
I can't answer that question. I can tell you what we can do.
That's what we're foreseeing.
Yeah.
We're foreseeing extinction of our cocoa.
And your input to raise that level of seriousness to this process is important. We need that. At the end of the day, we bring this regulation forward, and our board has to adopt it or not. If they choose to adopt it, it could be challenged and brought to a higher authority. That decision could get challenged and brought into court, and this could be tied up and not go into effect. So the community input is really critical to demonstrating the seriousness of this to our decision makers. We're just the technical staff that bring these regulations forward, and that's why we're here tonight.
We're going to use the term self-monitoring. What does that mean exactly? Do they monitor?
Can we?
You guys, real quick, I just want to make sure we are not talking out of turn with the directive. We have a microphone for a reason. We want to make sure that employees are heard, but we want to make sure that we are taking appropriate turns. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead and answer.
I think it's fine if you finish your thought.
Well, I'm just saying, who's monitoring the monitors? And are they self-monitoring themselves, or how does that work?
So all of the regulations we adopt.
Yeah, and if you don't have, you have limited power, who's got more power? You know, we invested everything to move here, and we love it here, but guess what? You're being poisoned. And how come there's no data sheet or registration about the health of the community and figure out what threshold when you say, okay, that's enough poisoning, or you know, monitor the health. I mean, I'm scared to ask my grandchildren to come up here from the Bay Area because they might drink the water, you know, and who has more teeth? So that we can, you know, maybe get more involved. We, the people, can say something when we're together, you know. And what do we need? An Ellen Brockovich over here, or what do we need? But these people that are here, you know, with their medical problems like us, you know, who's going to monitor that?
There, I can take the self-monitoring. So all of our regulations are written that the folks that are under the regulations have to monitor and report those information. They do that. They submit that information under penalty of perjury, and periodically we go around and inspect and check things and pull our own samples. But given the resources that we have available to us, that's how all statewide these programs work. Your other questions, I think, are something maybe we could talk to you about individually if you have some individual concerns, and maybe not in the public setting here.
Okay. I'm not a scientist or an environmentalist. I'm just an indigenous person who cares about the land and cares about all the beings that are connected to the lands here, and the airs and the waters. And I don't necessarily, after seeing, you know, like reading a bunch about the pesticides or seeing presentations, I don't understand a lot of it. But I don't think I need to. I just need to look around and see what's actually happening and what's been happening for decades, and what the community has been saying for decades, and what we're seeing in real time today in terms of new native housing being put on old lily bulb farms, and that the babies that are growing up there now have skin deformities that they're seeing, and that this person who's saying that she's been here for 3 years is having skin conditions as well, or that there's no eel in the mouth of the river, or that there weren't any fish at the fish camp this last summer. And there's evidence everywhere that these pesticides are affecting everything around us. And I don't need any science to back me up on that. I just need to look around. And so my question is, however long this process is going to take, whether it takes more decades or whatever, however long this takes to get a draft in, to get a finalized in, whatever, what is being included in the order that speaks to reparations past, current, and future that residents and other beings have to deal with until the water is of the quality of life?
That's powerful stuff, and unfortunately, we are not representatives of a body that can bring the resolution you're seeking. We can do what's within our limited ability, and we want your input to make sure that what we do is effective. And that's what we're here for tonight and to hear the perspective that you're sharing.
Can you answer a question about why are you protected by the state water board?
Can you get?
Why are you not following the rules on the?
So, can you give me maybe an example that might help illustrate that?
How do you not ready?
Talking about the pesticides that are applied on the fields, there's a state agency, the California Department of Pesticide Regulations, that issues the pesticide labels for approved pesticides. All of that comes from the federal government through the EPA, so there's a process established for that. And then there's a local entity, the County Ag Commissioner, that is the boots on the ground that checks to make sure that those things are being applied per the label. So that process is not part of our organization. We share information with them about what we're finding, and then they decide whether or not they're going to make a change to the allowed use of that pesticide.
I just want to kind of add to that I know that it's, you know, we're from the state of California, we're an agency from the state, and there's multiple agencies from the state that do different things. And so one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from this community kind of early in the process is frustration about why do I have to go to 3 different places to get kind of a problem solved. And so one of the things that we're looking at in this process is working closer with California Department of Pesticide Regulation and trying to work collaboratively with them on this process so that it's not siloed and water quality is over here and pesticide regulation is over here. We have this agreement that we can enter into between the agencies to make it a little more collaborative. Yeah, thank you. Because I know it's frustrating that go deal with that agency. Well, yeah, we're all part of the California EPA, and we should work together to address those concerns and not keep having people have to call, multiple different agencies. So I just wanted to say we did hear that, as we were scoping this, and that's one of the things that we're looking into right now.
So the problem that I'm having is that you said that you guys are the technical group that advises policy to the board, correct? And then they review it based on your data. Well, apparently you're not giving the data about all these suffering people, because if you were, their actions would be different, right?
Yeah, maybe there was a misunderstanding. So we've formed a technical advisory group starting for this order to help inform its contents. That was just constituted. So that group is comprised of the water board, of community groups, of state and federal scientists from other organizations, from the growing community, and that group together is going to help inform the content of the regulation. That was just constituted. Maybe there was another. So when this agency 15 years ago embarked on this process to start regulating agriculture, there was a technical advisory group that informed how should that occur. It was a very general overview of should we start here, there, should we do it region-wide, should we do it county-wide, and that was kind of the kickoff for our agency beginning to regulate agriculture. So that was, it didn't get into any specific issue. It was setting the process in motion.
I just want to do a quick time check here because we have a hard stop at 7:30, and there's a number of people here on our list here that wanted to speak. And so if you have not yet spoke, I think it's kind of been a mix of question and input anyway, so I think we'll just kind of go on with that more free-flowing conversation. And so if we can just prioritize folks that haven't spoken yet, and then we'll be able to go back to people that want to speak again.
Thank you. My name is Greg King, and I'm Executive Director of Siskiyou Land Conservancy. We've been working on this issue for 20 years, and I think that I'm going to just jump in with a little bit of history, and maybe I can clarify some of the answers to the questions that the people have, because they're excellent questions. And what we're looking at is a very long history, as a lot of people have noted, of pesticide inundation and poisoning in the lower Smith River. And Brenna, you said that this regulatory system is complex and it requires complex solutions, but what I've seen with the state of California, with the Water Board, with most of the state agencies, in particular Department of Pesticide Regulation, which you mentioned, and the County Health Department here, which you also mentioned, no real action on behalf of the people or behalf of the ecosystems. The history of this, as people have noted, goes back to 1982, when the Water Board did find very high levels of 1,2-dichloropropane and aldecarb in Smith River wells. Some of the wells tested higher than as anywhere in the nation. And it wasn't the Water Board's actions that phased those out. Those were phased out everywhere because they were so pernicious. In 2002, another organization that I founded, the Smith River Project, we tested wells in Smith River and found more than a dozen still contaminated with 1,2-D. As some of them were more than 100 feet deep, these wells, so highly pernicious groundwater contaminants. That chemical was replaced with another chemical called 1,3-dichloropropene. It's also a groundwater contaminant. It's highly toxic. It's carcinogen, and it's deadly to fish. There are about a dozen pesticides used on the Smith River Plain that are deadly to aquatic organisms and extremely harmful to humans in a very small concentrated area. There's a woman up here, a couple of people have mentioned the health impacts to dead bees. I wanted to go over the health assessment that we did in 2016 for the town of Smith River. We had a 17% response rate. And the issues that increased dramatically for people after they moved here were chronic coughs, infections, skin rashes, eye problems, headaches, nosebleeds, digestive problems, urinary problems, sleep loss, neurological disorders, heart disease, and cancer. All of them were extremely elevated after people moved here. And that's what I'm hearing tonight as well. As far as the history of regulation, why is this taking so long? We thought that in 2002, after we found these results and we got the Water Board up here to confirm them, which you did, that there would be action. There was no action until that testing in 2010, and that was largely due to our cajoling for 8 years to get the Water Board up here to test surface waters for pesticides. And the Water Board took 6 samples and found 4 of them were contaminated for salmonid reproduction of the salmonid food chain, chronic reproductive toxicity. In 2013, the testing was repeated, and there were.
Yes.
Thank you. There's not really a question. I'm just trying to answer some of the questions. And as Brenna said, we've kind of moved on to comments. And so I just want to emphasize, again, 2013, chronic and acute reproductive toxicity, which means that the basis of the salmonid food chain, the Cereodaphnia dubia, if you drop it in that water from Rowdy Creek, from the mouth of Rowdy Creek, it would die. So that's how toxic the water is. The high elevated levels of copper in the water, right through the 17 pesticides found in 2015 or 16, I don't quite remember the year. And then
30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. And then in 2018, you developed your team, which removed us from the process, the people with the most experience in the room besides the Water Board itself. And now we're back to this permit process. And then we get a draft permit in 2 years, comments, etc. This process, I just want my last thing that I'm going to say is that this process is meant to take forever. There is no desire on the state of California to crack down on pesticide inundation. It's a $60 billion a year industry. So it's going to take the people, it's going to take the people sitting in this room changing how business is done in Smith River. Thank you.
So if we can get a show of hands, how many more folks would like to provide input? Who has not spoken who would like to provide input? So we had two more, so we have three folks that want to, so we have 15 minutes left. We're going to ask folks to keep their comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Sam. I have one question. You talk about the water and everything, but what's your economic plan? Do you have any, partner with any other individuals? Because it's like a chair, right? You're talking about one peg of a chair, the four legs. Who else do we partner with in regards to the economic side of the impact or plan? Because, as you say, it's a complex issue, and we all live here. We all feel your effects being here. We have to live here after you're gone. What is your plan economically, if any?
So you're asking the economic impact of the order itself?
You're going to go to the people that make decisions. What is your economic plan or economic impact or the cultural impact or community impact that you've given to us here? What is the plan?
Right, so as part of the order that we bring forward to our board and as part of the draft that we hope to get input on, we do have to do an economic analysis. So that includes the cost of compliance, the cost of monitoring, the cost of reporting, and we also, I think that's part of CEQA as well. We do that for CEQA, and that is one thing that we rely on community input for. Are those types of things. So that's definitely those types of comments we're really interested in hearing from folks is what is the economic impact of these types of things.
Just a quick question on the process. When you say these are things you want to hear about, when you're hearing them tonight, they're not being recorded, or how does one make sure our comments get involved? What's the process we have to go through?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So
thank you.
Thank you. We're taking this right now. And we don't have any formal release of a document yet. So there's nothing really for you to provide formal comments on at this point related to the order. We have, for the environmental document, the environmental impact report, tomorrow night we're accepting comments on the range of environmental analysis for that impact report. In general, let me go back a couple slides. Yeah, thank you. And that comment period goes through November 25th. So let me put this slide up again because this kind of outlines the various places that you can comment and how to do it. So I talked about the CEQA scoping. So in early 2026, we are releasing a draft order. That's just a draft. It doesn't represent what's going to be in the final order. We put it out there with the express purpose of getting comments on it. We want you to tear it apart. We want to get a lot of comments on it so we make it the best version of what it can be. So you can either submit written comments to our agency on that draft, or we have a public workshop with our board where you can come and provide oral comments that both our board here and staff here. And so we consider both when we are working on revisions to that draft order. Written comments that you submit on our draft order, we respond to those for both the order and for the environmental impact report. So that's one way that you know that your comment is being considered. And then for the public workshop, we record and broadcast our board meetings. So that's another way to know that your comment has been recorded for the future. And that's the same thing for the adoption hearing. You can attend that hearing and provide oral comments to our board, either in support of the order or, certain things you don't like, you can urge them to send it back to us and revise it again.
But before that, before the early 2026, meetings that you're conducting, you are taking your first draft?
We're taking notes. Well, right now, we are so early in the process. We are taking notes, and this is really kind of for us to scope community input kind of as a whole as we get into the process. This is not like we don't have something to respond to yet.
I was asked to bear testimony tonight of something that happened to me last year, but I want to preface it with I have come and gone from Smith River 4 times because over the last 35 years, because I love it here. I love it. My kids went to Smith River School. I know a lot of the people that worked at the school. Ruthie Floyd was one of the people that worked at the school for 35 years, and she has bone cancer. My kids came home at certain times of the school year with their backpacks covered with whatever the heck it was they were spraying across the street. It's still happening. Those trees that are across the street from Smith River Elementary School were put there by my friend Beverly to be a block from the pesticides that were airborne. I didn't think much of it, not my problem. You know, it doesn't affect you until it affects you. Last year, I was in my own backyard on Ocean View Drive, backs up to a lily field, and I was planting flowers. And I saw that they were working the field like usual, and I thought, well, they're just doing something that raises dust. I always have a hanky in my back pocket because I've had a chronic cough ever since I moved to Smith River. So I had my hanky, and I thought, well, I've got a few more flowers to plant. I can get it done before they get close to my fence line. I put the hanky over my face. As the machine came around, they were not doing dirt, they were spraying. And there was enough wind that it caught me smack in the face, sent me to my knees. My skin burned, my eyes burned, my tongue swelled up, I had blisters on it, I ended up in the ER. I got from the back of my house where they were spraying around to the front of the house and bent over to catch my breath. I could not breathe. There's a creek between where I was planting my flowers on my property and the lily fields. That creek runs directly into the ocean. Not only is there one right there behind my property, but there's a huge one on the other side that the herd of elk come through and lay in, and a lot of water comes off of there. I've been here for enough winters. I know nothing stays put. So I went to the ER. I got treatment. Cost me $450. I want to thank Rob Miller if he's here. I don't know who he is, but thank you for paying for my ER bill. But this has made it personal to me. If that's what the kids and Ruthie Floyd have been exposed to, that's huge. That's a problem. Thank you.
My brother and I just moved here about 1.5 years ago, and I spent 9 months getting over a case of thrush, and then I have spent 3 months getting over a case of COVID, and this is disappointing because we love it. We love the coast. My husband and I came over here and fished for many, many years. He died in 2015, and my brother and I decided we wanted to get to the coast, and we've been happy here. But I never got an annual water report, which I did in Wairika, where I came from. And I'm wondering, do you get annual drinking water reports? You should. And I'm wondering now about our drinking water, and it's chlorinated because I can smell it, and that indicates to me that they're using it heavily. And sometimes my husband used to say, when somebody uses too much chlorine, it's creating the opposite effect, that you really needed to reduce it. But that's because he was water and wastewater supervisor. I'm just really, why wasn't there when we sold our houses, we had to disclose anything that was wrong with our house. Why was that not disclosed to me? Plus, I believe that somebody knew and joked about the fine Smith River water, and I'm not saying who that was, but I'm just saying there should have been disclosures in my escrow. This is something that I should have known. And my brother has health problems. He has cardiomyopathy, if you don't mind me saying. We came over in COPD. We came over here to retire, to have a good life. And this is what we get to hear. This is 30 seconds. Well, what else did I want to say? The chronic cough and a lot of these symptoms, we're coughing all the time. And it's heartbreaking because now for us to move, I don't know how we would do it because, we would have to get a place and then we'd have the difficulty of selling our place. And I've spent a lot of money fixing up my yard and putting in more solar, and I love doing that. But I have been really disappointed tonight to hear all this. I had no idea. No, I should have.
Ma'am, where do you pay your water bill?
I paid it at the library.
The community service district? Right. So your water provider should be able to give you a report.
All I know is that there's 4 wells, and I don't know which one we are getting our water from.
Yeah, check with your water provider. They are regulated by the Division of Drinking Water and have an obligation to...
No matter what size your community is, no matter the size of the community?
This system here is regulated by the State Division of Drinking Water. It's large. It serves enough people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, you can ask your water provider for that information.
We as a community don't even get an MSDS as for what these bulb farmers are using. We don't know. We don't know, the procedures that they go through. We don't know when they spray, what they're spraying at what time of the year, so at least we could be prepared. The MSDS would probably help us to see what the side effects are going to be. There's a lack of education to the community from the bulb growers, and I think this meeting really should have the Pesticide Control Board involved also, so that we can address some of these issues. And I know air quality is probably the most useless government agency that I've had dealings with because they're overpowered. A lot of the problem is the wind will be blowing 20 miles an hour and they'll be tractoring in the fields. There will be massive amounts of dust flying all over. Pesticide residue is going to be inside of that dust, and I think that's more of a hazard, or as much as a hazard as the water runoff. So maybe we need air quality in these meetings also, so that you guys, everybody can get involved and see what's going on. You really need to also look into the cancer rates in this community. The cancer rates. How many people here know somebody with cancer, has died or has cancer? I've had lymphoma since I've been up here. Where it came from, I don't know. As to whether it was caused here or previous employers. But we really need to look at the cancer rates in this community, and I'll find that you'll probably see that they're some of the highest in the country, probably just as bad as near any refinery in the South.
So we definitely hear the comments on working together with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and like I mentioned before, that's one of the avenues we're exploring. As I said earlier, the Ag Commissioner and the local Ag Department they're the folks that you would go to with pesticide drift or complaints, particularly if you wanted to know what's being sprayed, when is it being sprayed, kind of the nuts and bolts of it. That is your local resource for that information.
I went to them years ago, and that was just a waste of time.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I notice our supervisor's not here tonight either.
Here goes.
Yeah, just real quick. I think you said 2018 you had a technical advisory committee come up with the self-monitoring plan. Was there a public scoping session like tonight involved in that process in 2018? And if not, why not? If so, was it just kind of a turnout? And there's a lot of concern here in this community that you guys are finding tonight. I'm wondering why not 2018.
So, Don, I think you're talking about the water quality management plan and the stewardship team that was formed in 2018. I think that's what you're referencing. Yeah, so that was a direction. That was a non-regulatory activity. That was a voluntary arrangement that our board directed staff to work with growers and other state agencies and.
We said you had to try supervisors.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that was a direction from our board. It was a non-regulatory activity. It was a voluntary approach that got the ball rolling. There you go.
Just want to say for the full history of the pesticide contamination and the water board's activity, et cetera, go to siskiyouland.org. We have a new report we just put up. It's 45 pages, but it's the whole history for the last 40 years.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we are at a hard stop at 7:30. But sir, I encourage you come up to us after the meeting's over, and we can.
Or scoping, maybe a third party to monitor that's not in this area, that's totally neutral. And then the people leaving, these people have so much.
Yeah, okay. KFUG Community Radio. Some guys talking a bunch and getting applause from the audience, but every mic in the whole place has been cut. So I'm sitting here just a second.
If you don't get together to speak up, one day everything will get done. I don't even know why I wrote right 2026 when that 2025 was supposed to be slow.
Okay, I'm cool. So anyway, yeah, rousing speech being given by an attendee here and totally off microphone. So
well, thank you guys. We really appreciate you coming and providing input. And again, we really encourage you, if you have time, to come tomorrow to the Board of Supervisors meeting. And if you're interested, to the CEQA scoping meeting tomorrow night. And feel free to approach the table after the meeting if you want any more information or contact. All right, thank you.
And there you have it. You've been listening to this live community meeting. I've got to run and get some contact information for a person for Jessica. So, Amanda, I'm going to hand it back to you right now. Thank you so very much.
You got it. Yeah, you are listening to KFUG LP Crescent City 101.1 FM. You just heard the Lily Bulb Water Board quality planning meeting and a lot of passionate perspectives. We've been recording this as well, so we should be able to make that available to the public at some point.